Everybody can hear me all right, I take it? All right, well, welcome, both employees and their guests. Thanks for taking the time to come out today. We realized trying to do this on a Friday before the holidays wasn't the ideal time. So we tried to provide two different opportunities for people to come that would be convenient for most, if not all, of our employees. And also our guest speaker today, who I'll introduce later. Please help yourself to the refreshments. Again, we weren't really sure about what we'd have for a turnout, given kind of the short notice and the time of the year. So we didn't provide a full meal, but there are some sodas and snacks over there for you. I hope you leave here today feeling your attendance here was worthwhile and that you're excited about George and Lynch and your future. All right, there are people here that may know more about the history of George and Lynch than I do. Certainly some people who have lived more of it than I have. But there's also some newer employees that we haven't communicated much of our history to. And I wouldn't expect our guests to know a lot about our history. So we're going to take a little time and go through the history of how we got to where we are today. There are a few slides, the next few slides will do that for us. All right, so 1923, Highland P. George and John P. Lynch formed George and Lynch right here in Dover, Delaware. Their early projects included municipal utilities. You can see some pictures of water and sewer being installed in Lewis back in the 20s in our office. And they also were doing new road construction. Some other significant projects they did early on were both before Dover Air Force Base, there was the Dover Army Airfield, and even before World War II, it was a private airport. I just learned that recently. But I did know that we did work at Dover, converting that private airfield into Dover Army Airfield back during the World War II era. And at the same time, we were doing work at Cape and Lopin State Park. It was then Fort Miles, doing subcontract work, structure work. If you've been there in recent years, there's a gun, I'm trying to think what they call it now, battlement, I guess I would call it. Or if you drive up and down the highway, you can see towers along Route 1 that were part of the Fort Miles. I don't know, I can't say exactly because it wasn't there, but my understanding is that we did structural work on that contract. So it could have been those battlements, it could also have been those towers that you still see that are now 80 years old. So then in the 50s, Mr. George and Mr. Lynch sold the company to Dick Appleby Sr. and Joe Pennington Sr. And they got involved in the hot mix industry, producing and laying asphalt. They also got involved as utilities on poles started to go underground, specifically telephone, did a lot of telephone work. And then later in the 50s, when Mr. Pennington passed, Dick Appleby Sr. became the sole owner. And later on, when he passed, his sons, Dick Jr. and Bob, took over the company. Many of us remember Dick and Bob. They divested the company into more hot mix plants, sand plants, etc. Anybody who was here before, oh gosh, probably before at least 1994, probably considers themselves hired or worked for Bob and Dick Appleby. So fast forward a little bit. They ran the company for a few decades, and by 93, they were already planning for their retirement, and they brought on a new executive in 1989. He brought experience with alternative contracting methods, not just being low price. And we built a wastewater treatment plant near Rehoboth Beach that lifted a building moratorium in Sussex County that had been in place for some time. I believe that was the first design-build project for a public agency in the state. Look at all the work that's led to, not just for us, but many others in the last 15 to 20 years. Then in 94, you may have wondered, well, the last slide I talked about, there were some former assets there that are now operated by other people. In 94, the Applebys did actually retire. You might say they cashed in their chips because they sold the material side of the business, both the hot mix plants and the sand plants, to the primary competitor. They sold the construction company to the executive they hired, that I mentioned previously, and 19 other employees. They were all superintendents, estimators, or managers. And we became a closely held private company, but not an ESOP. It was a new business. Matter of fact, management referred to it as NewCo for a period of time. And also as a result of selling those material asphalts, we had to buy all our hot mix from Tilcon, and they had the first rate to do any of our paving. Then in '96, without the plants or paving, we couldn't do larger highway or DelDOT projects anymore. We did keep the milling, and we learned to be more productive at utilities and structures work, as well as anything else that we did. And we looked for the next big thing. That came in the form of directional drilling and other trenchless technologies. In 2004, our non-compete with Tilcon expired, and we started back with one paving crew, primarily where we were doing paving on new development projects. And then in 2006, we were approached by a new stone depot that was served by a railroad in Dagsboro. We formed a partnership with Haynes & Kibblehouse, that's the stone supplier, and assembled a hot mix asphalt plant with a mix of old and new components. That partnership is River Asphalt, probably all familiar with that name, and that plant is known as River One. Note that Tilcon has ceased doing construction and producing hot mix. That ended around 2008, after we got back into both doing our own paving work and producing hot mix. They leased and eventually sold those former facilities to a present competitor of ours, Allen Myers. And then through 2005, or changing subjects, and through 2005, our office was headquartered in historic Newcastle, and we had another small office and a shop on Water Street. We consolidated all of those and built a new office and a shop on Lafferty Lane. Unintentionally, but understandably, the vast majority of our work has migrated south. So we used to do much more work in Newcastle County, some of you will remember. All right. And then in 2007, after a lot had happened in a short period of time, Will Robinson, that executive that was hired to run the new company, decided to retire. A lot of folks considered that George and Lynch was Bob and Dick's company well beyond their retirement in '94, but the truth is they were out of it financially long before Will's retirement. They did serve on our board for a long period of time. I can even remember Bob coming to visit, jobs, much less than he used to, but I can remember a couple of situations he did that. So since '94, the owners have had a buy-sell agreement in place that stipulates how the repurchase of stock works. That happens, or has always happened, upon retirement or any other separation of employment. I will note that sadly, Will passed away about a year ago from complications due to COVID. Okay, so move forward to 2008. River Asphalt bought an existing plant in Delmar. That's known as River 2. And then in 2013, we were approached by another highway contractor that already had their own hot mix plant in Wilmington. And we formed a second partnership known as Tri-County Materials. That partnership is with Diamond Materials, as many of you know. And that plant is located along Bay Road, across from Dearborn Air Force Base, almost next to former plant that G&L had disposed of 20 years previously. When that sale happened in '94, George and Lynch did retain property from that sale. Many of us knew it as the Boneyard for a long period of time, and that's where that plant now sits. We have by the way, we have a permanent easement to that property because, as you know, we share an entrance with Penn Sea Supply and with Allen Myers. Okay, so in 2017, Dennis Dinger took over from Will Robinson, he took over in 2007 when Will retired. And then Dennis retired in 2017. That's been a little over 4 years ago. At that time, there were 10 remaining owners. We started out with 20, we were down to 10. So going from 2017 to 21, shortly after 2017, we started to look at what the next transition was going to look like. The legacy that Bob and Dick left us and Will left us has served us well for over 25 years. But the 9 remaining owners recognized there were going to have to be some modifications to our form of ownership before we all would retire. And after looking at several options and working with consultants, namely Menke, who is going to speak later, we unanimously agreed to form an ESOP. And looking ahead to the rest of this decade in the 2030s, myself and those other 8 owners will retire. We've already identified some key employees that will take larger roles in management of the company over time. I said some employees because there will also be opportunities for others to be promoted as well. I plan to be around through the 40s and 50s, God willing, and I'm interested to see what some of you can do with the company when I'm gone. All right, so reasons why we decided to have an employee stock ownership plan. It started out, honestly, we were looking for an exit strategy. There wasn't any urgency. We had time to plan. And after looking at all those things, I already mentioned, we decided on the ESOP. Another thing it does for us, we recognize that myself and others were offered a tremendous opportunity back in 1994. Others weren't offered that opportunity. This gives us the chance to share the ownership of the company with other people. It's taken a long time to get here, but I'm very grateful for the opportunity to do that. We also have a family culture. I know I've enjoyed that myself. Not to say there aren't consequences if we make a mistake, but I think we're more forgiving than others. And we take a let's learn from this, this mistake approach. We also work with family situations where we can. As far as leadership, I really don't want to work for somebody else. I'd rather train others to take my place. I think, as far as morale, hopefully that goes along with the sharing and with new opportunities for folks. Retention and recruitment was not really part of our original consideration, when we started moving this direction. But more recently, I certainly see or hope that it is going to make a difference, both retaining employees and recruiting new employees. By the way, this process probably started about 18 months ago when we first looked at and we're making the decision what direction we wanted to go. All right, so you're going to hear a lot more about how the ESOP actually works in a moment. But for now, I will say this because you know some of these folks, or hopefully all of us already. There is an ESOP plan committee, which is essentially the officers of the company. So that's myself, it's Len Brooks, it's Rick Stoops, and it's Christina Funk. All right, and that committee directs the trustee, which we are required to have. That trustee looks after the interests of all employees to make sure we're doing right by them, to make sure that we're giving timely and accurate reporting, and making payments when that applies. We've had fiduciaries for some time for our 401k plan have been Len and Christy. So we thought it made sense to be consistent. This is really another retirement plan. So the same 2 individuals are our fiduciaries for the ESOP. All right, and lastly, I know this is probably a big question on everybody's mind. Is management changing, or what input do I have in the company? Well, management is not changing for now. We feel that's important to continue. But everybody does have a stake in the game, and that means you're welcome to ask questions, provide suggestions. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Phil D. Dominicus. Hopefully I got that right. He is with Menke Associates. We started working with Phil initially, as I mentioned, about 18 months ago, and then probably more recently, about 6 months ago, when we really put the gears in motion to do all the work that had to be done. And it was a big lift. I'll tell you, we've spent, not just with Phil, but with attorneys and other folks, we spent about $200,000 to get to this point to be able to do this for everybody. So with that, I'll turn it over to Phil.
While we pull up the slide presentation, I always like coming to these presentations because I learned a lot more about my clients a lot of times than I knew for the last 18 months spending with them. But one of the things you look at, the 80-year track record of this business, my business has only been around, my company's only been around for 47 years. So, but one of the things that should be pretty obvious in that timeline is one of the issues of privately owned businesses is someone needs to own them next. So when you look at the adult U.S. workforce, about 65% of us, me included, work for privately owned businesses. We're not public companies. We don't trade on open markets. We're privately owned businesses owned by individuals, and someone needs to own them next. So they're always like, well, what do we do with this thing next? Your company's gone through, looks like 4 rounds maybe of major shareholders, embarking on a 5th round to stay up, running, healthy, etc. And so this retirement plan that we're introducing today, the employee stock ownership plan, is going to be part of that. And I'm going to walk you through what it is, briefly highlight. We're not going anywhere, so if you have questions tomorrow, next week, next year, ask your management team. There'll be a lot more information to come, but we wanted to at least introduce the concept to you to understand where the next stage of your business is going. As a matter of background, I'm from Delaware. I grew up in Wilmington, and then I moved to New York for a long time to be an investment banker. I've been working for my company, Menke & Associates, for the last 17 years. We are an ESOP-owned business as well. You guys are an ESOP-owned business now. We've been one for quite some time. It's 70% of my privately owned business that I work for is owned by our retirement plan. Yours is 30%. Every company is a little bit different. My founder is still here working for the business. He owns the other 30%. So you guys have 2 retirement plans. I'm an engineer by training, so I like data. About half the U.S. workforce, working adults, have no retirement plans. Nothing is offered by the companies that they work for. The other half have something. It's usually a 401k offered to you. Please put some of your money aside for your own retirement. And although I don't sell 401ks, you'll hear me talk about it a little bit because I think it's a great place for all of us to save for our own retirement. About a quarter of all U.S. workers, the company funds one of your retirement plans. Meaning, for example, the bottom left-hand corner, your company has a 4% match to your 401k. So although I think it's in your best interest to save for your own retirement through your 401k, it's a very tax-efficient way to do it. Your company is also encouraging you to do it with a 4% match up to 4% of your pay. So if you're not taking advantage of that, I encourage you to take a look at it. We're adding the second retirement plan on the right side, the employee stock ownership plan. So you now have 2 retirement plans, which is about 10% of all working adults. So a couple takeaways today. One is you're 1 in 10 employees in the U.S. that your company is paying for and sponsoring 2 plans. The second takeaway is on the right-hand side, this doesn't come from your paycheck. This is in addition to everything that you're currently getting paid. The company will start making contributions to this second plan for your benefit. So it's more. But we still want you to understand what it is, why it was set up, how it works, so that you can hopefully take advantage of it for yourself. by the way, feel free to interrupt me and have questions. And then at the end, I'll be here for as long as you guys are asking. So we're just going to walk you through what it is, why your company did one. Chris did a little bit of that. How does it work? How does your work affect the value of this account? Which to me is one of the cool parts about it. And what it is in it for you. Can you guys hear me okay in the back of the room? You're good? Okay. Usually people don't have a problem hearing me. So what is it? It's a retirement plan funded by the company for your benefit, but then so is your 401k. Your 401k, you can put some money in, and the company puts some money in. So why did they add a second plan? And the reason for that is the 401k plan, regardless of where the money came from you or the company, cannot buy shares of the business that you work at. So I have a 401k, my company has a little bit of a match in there, just like yours. I'm in charge of where those funds get invested. I can buy lots of stuff, I just can't buy Nike and Associates stock. Same thing with your company. Your 401k, if you're using it, can buy lots of stuff, but you cannot buy George and Lynch stock. Okay? Well, that's what the ESOP is for. It's a separate set of rules to protect the participant. You guys are the participants, but that's why it was set up, because the data says that if you have an equity stake in the business you work at, you'll behave a little differently, and you've got to do as a team better. And I'll give you some examples as we go through this. So 401k, you decide how it's invested, buy lots of stuff, companies maybe, just not this one. ESOP, company funded only, nothing from you except your loyalty, invested in your company stock. One of the, when we look at why an ESOP, you kind of start big and go small, but the data says, and this industry's been around for 47 years, is if you connect the employee to long-term comp as well as short-term comp, the long-term prospects of the business, you'll start thinking a little bit differently. We all get paid for today. Show up to work, do this job, this is how you get paid. But all your current pay doesn't really have you focus on next year or 5 years from now. But your job depends on how well you do next year and 5 years from now. And that's how owners think. Owners are thinking about, how do we bid this job? How do we get it done? How do we do well? How do we get on to the next one? How do we stay profitable? Well, if all the employees, 200 or so employees,
around 200,
are all thinking that way, which is how do we think about the long-term longevity of the business, you'll behave a little bit differently. Something's not quite right at a job, we'll go home, we'll deal with it tomorrow. Now this needs to get fixed. And because if we leave it and something goes wrong, well, now we start to lose money. Interesting. Well, I paid you to show up and work that day. I didn't really pay you to worry about profits, but now we're paying you to worry about profits. We need you to do well. We need you to be efficient. We need you to think about things. Perfect example, work hazards. You guys, I'm sure, run across a lot of work hazards. Option 1, walk around it. Option 2, tell somebody. Option 3, fix it. The walking around it isn't a great option, because if the person behind you that works here hurts themselves, they're out. We don't want anyone to get hurt. But now we're down a person, and we're less efficient at the job. So there's lots of little things, and depending on what your job is, you're just in charge or see different things. Truck drivers are different than the ones putting pipes in the ground, etc. But what is in your realm, and if you see something that's not quite right, either do something or say something. If you see a work hazard, do something or say something. Because every time someone doesn't and then something happens, that harms the business. Those are the things we're trying to, that changes at employee-owned businesses over time. You just think a little differently. I think it's kind of redefining how you see your job at the business. So these things tend to be win-win-win. And again, the neat thing about, and you're going to see in a couple slides, is there's lots of data of ESOP-owned business versus non-ESOP-owned businesses, and they do dramatically better than the competition. But for the employee, it's more compensation, hopefully better compensation, more retirement. For some of you, hard to think about retirement, it's way out there, but frankly, the younger people in the room have the most to gain from all these plans. If you stuff some money aside, it grows and grows and grows until your retirement. The other thing you're going to see towards the end of the presentation is we as individuals are responsible for our own retirement, period. Not the government, not your company. We are, right? Individuals. But your government's trying to help by offering these plans with tax incentives. Your company's clearly trying to help. You're now one of 10 employees that have 2 plans. But now, really asking you to dig in, learn about them. They're not the most obvious things, neither is the 401k, but look at the plans. If you don't understand them or have some question, ask HR, ask your manager, they're all here to help. But employee-owned companies tend to have more loyal employees. You prefer to work here versus somewhere else. The companies tend to do better. And there's a shared ownership concept. Maybe it's a little bit more interesting to work here than somewhere else because someone actually cares about my opinion, maybe. About 23,000 U.S. businesses have adopted ESOPs in the last 47 years. There's currently about $1.4 trillion in ESOP accounts. It's a massive industry, but in a much smaller group of hands. So you're going to see me give you 2 statistics, and I do it twice because I want you to remember them. But the average ESOP participant in this country right now is 4.5 times the retirement funds of your counterparts, those without it. Now your ESOP's brand new, so until December 31, next week, there's not even anything in it, but on December 31st will be the first deposit. And the average 60 to 64-year-old has 10 times their counterpart. These things have been around for a long time. Lots of wealth being built up for the participants. So the data says they work really well. How you guys do will depend on how well you do at this company. So what the data says is you tend to be more productive. And again, I don't work 3 extra hours for fun. I think it's how I see my job, how I help out others. There's a lot of things I do at my company that don't affect my current pay. Someone else's client, they need a little help. But it does affect how well the company does. It protects the reputation. You guys have an awesome reputation, by the way. It's the name on all your shirts and whatever. Protect it. Because it's one of the hardest things to build up at any company is a reputation. It's one of the easiest things to lose. You see lots of companies in the newspaper every once in a while, just some idiot did something, and then all of a sudden the company's like, nobody likes the company anymore. But just like that. So protect that because it's where you guys get your business. It tends to increase retention. You just prefer working here versus somewhere else. Please look at your entire comp packages. Current pay is important, but so is your retirement, and you guys have a very generous retirement package. More attractive recruiting tool. If there's job openings, we want to get people to work here, not somewhere else. By the way, if you know people that you think would be good workers, and then tell HR, get this person in and listen to. Well, that's not your job. Yeah, but it helps the company. And now we're paying you to help the company. And then maybe increasing morale. I kind of compare it to Thanksgiving dinner where you're now at the adult table and we're asking for ideas. We always wanted your ideas. We always wanted to know this stuff. But now this retirement plan pays you for that. The more good ideas management gets and enacts that helps the business, the safer you are, the lower the turnover, the better your business is. Lots of companies have ESOPs locally. Redner's, Wawa, W.L. Moore, my sister-in-law used to be the head of HR there. A lot of companies you'll recognize in your industry, construction companies, architectural firms, lots of ESOP-owned businesses for the same reason, which is good business, kind of local, hard to sell maybe, and you don't want to sell, but someone needs to own it next. So an ESOP is a nice thing to fit in to help that succession plan, who's going to own it next. You will see ESOP-owned businesses disproportionately in a good way showing up on these studies. You know, best big company to work for almost half the companies have ESOPs, but only 11% of businesses have ESOPs, but they're half of the companies that are on the list of best to work for. Large company, small company, most trustworthy company. This is the most technical slide, so bear with me, but what essentially is occurring is your company, which is formerly G&L Holdings, Inc., is making cash contributions to your ESOP. No different than it makes a cash contribution to your 401k as a match. Cash goes in. The question is, where's the cash go? Your 401k, it goes to your account, you go buy some fund. And the ESOP, which is controlled by the board of directors of your company, it's being used. The reason why I was put in there was to buy some shares of your company from one of the existing shareholders. We're changing shareholders. So company pays for it. Same thing as the first slide. This is more, but the money is then being used to buy some shares for your benefit. Once a year, you're going to get a statement. This is your first year. Your year's not over yet, but there will be shares spread out amongst the eligible employees this year, and somewhere in next year, you will get your first statement that says, congratulations, you are a participant in the 2021 ESOP, and here's how much you earned within that plan. Your 401k, you can get a statement every month. You can log on and see how it changes every day. ESOPs are much more boring on that side. We only value the shares once a year. We only dole out shares once a year, December 31st. So try to be here on December 31st. And then next year at some point you'll get a statement that says, here's how well you did. To Chris's point, how's the company run? It's how all companies run. Employees report to management, management to the board of directors. The board of directors is up there. They're in charge of big picture stuff and direction. Should we do another asphalt plant? That's kind of a big picture thing. Should we move into Maryland? That kind of big picture thing. Management's in charge of running day to day. And of course, we all as employees are in charge of doing all the work. After the ESOP, same thing. We're not changing how the company runs. We're changing how you guys hopefully relate to management and how you, again, your job description. I think it's just pay a little bit more attention, think a little bit more broad, care. It's like your home, your car, if you own them, you tend to treat them a little bit nicer, think a little bit more broader about them. We're hoping the same thing happens with your company. So 4 steps to earn something. 1, are you eligible in 2021 to get something? And then 2022. So it's a one-time test at the end of each year. We say, oh, there's 200 employees who actually made the bar that year. Step 2 is how much do you get? Step 3 is do you get to keep it if you leave? And then step 4 is when do you get your money? That's probably the most important one. When do I get my money? So for 2021, again, it's not over yet. It ends in a couple of weeks. But all the employee information is going to be sent to our firm, and we're going to look at everybody. It's real simple. You're a W-2 employee, you worked at least 1,000 hours, and you're still employed on December 31st, you're eligible for this year to earn something. What you're going to get is the company, the company puts the contributions in. So again, your 401k, please put some of your money in there, payroll deduction. You don't have to. I think it's in your best interest to do it. ESOP, the only thing you need to do to get something here is the slide before. Show up to work, please work here, not somewhere else. So shares are going in. The way your ESOP is set up, and they're all set up a little bit different, but we know, for example, this year, 3% of the shares of the business will be earned by most of you in this room. You'll get pieces of the 3%. We also know next year, same thing. And we know that for the next 10 years, 3% of the shares of this business are going to be handed out, or allocated is the word we use, to who's ever an eligible employee in each of the next 10 years. So what do you need to do to get some? You gotta work here, not across the street. How much do you get? So the company is putting in 3%, and then there's this allocation formula, but it's essentially gives you credit for your paycheck and gives it and credit for years of the business. So you'll get 1 unit or point for every $1,000 of pay, and 1 unit for every 2 years of service. And you'll see that in your first statement of how much credit you're getting. So if you have 2 identical people, but one's been here for the last 35 years, which some of you have, you'll get more because you've been a nice, loyal employee. And for the younger folks, the longer you stay here, the more you're going to be earning as well. By the way, at the end of this meeting, there's some handouts that has all this in writing, so you don't have to remember it. And if you're ever scratching your head of how it works, refer to that. If you're still scratching your head, talk to your manager, talk to HR. Stock dividends. This is the fun part about ESOPs, which is, you know, there's going to be an equity ownership of this business allocated to you. And if it's paying out profits, hey, we have excess cash, let's send it to our shareholders. Whatever that is, you'll get a piece of that. And the longer you're here, the more shares you have attached to you, the more of that dividend check you get, which is kind of a cool thing. There's a vesting schedule. All retirement plans, your 401k match, and this ESOP have a vesting schedule. And what does that say? It says, well, we're handing you these things, congratulations, but we want you to be here for a period of time before you get to keep it. And Congress understands, Congress is the one who sets up all these rules, that turnover at businesses is extremely expensive. It really harms productivity if you guys are constantly going across the street, coming back around. Very expensive to do. So the company is paying you extra according to the law. No one has to do this. But in return for that, there's a loyalty component. So the loyalty component says, if you're a new employee in 2021, you just showed up, that you might earn something in 2021, which is year 1, and then next year, the year after. But you need to stay here 5 full years before you get to keep everything should you leave after that. So I've been at Menke for 17 years. I actually have a 6-year vesting schedule. It's longer than yours. Your company's nicer than mine. But I've been here 17 years in my company, so if I leave, I'm well past the vesting schedule. It's a one-time test. Who's responsible? You know, when you leave, we look at, well, who's is part of the vesting schedule. It's not death, disability, or retirement age, which for you guys is 65 and 5 years in the plan, but everybody else then is the vesting schedule. I kind of call it quick get laid off, get fired. Excuse my bluntness. Now it's interesting, the last bullet point. This is the only plan that's set up like this in the country, an ESOP, which is if let's say I'm one of your current employees, I'm here for 3 years, I leave in year 4. I've earned stuff for 3 years, but according to the vesting schedule, after 3 years, I would have kept 60%. I forfeit 40% of my account. I don't get to keep it. I simply wasn't here long enough. And you like me, so you're sorry to see me go, but where does my 40% go? Because of you guys still in the room. Interesting. It's the only plan that works that way, that if somebody leaves something behind and I go back to the company, it goes to the other employees. Your company's also been nice in a second way, which is, although your plan starts January 1 of this year, so we're announcing it today, but it's actually retroactive for the whole year, so congratulations, you're about to earn more. In the vesting schedule, they're giving you 1 vested year for every 7 years you've been here prior to 2021. So if you've been here 8 years, you already have a prior year of service, and then you're all gonna have 2021 in a couple of weeks. So you're already 2 years in. We still don't wanna see you go, but they give you some extra credit in the schedule. You've been here for 14 years or more, you have 2 extra years. Been here 35 years, you're fully vested. Congratulations. The exceptions, which I was pointing out to this vesting schedule, are up there on the board. I don't necessarily recommend them, but should you pass away, God forbid, your family gets all of the value in there regardless of how old you were. The company is sold. We're not trying to sell the business. It's the opposite. We're trying to keep it independent, but if it is, everybody gets whatever is assigned to them within the account. When do you get your money? Well, when somebody leaves, again, we're trying to define who you are when you leave. Death, disability, retirement, everybody else. So it depends on which bucket you're in. Everybody else, there's a vesting schedule. Death, disability, retirement, there isn't. These people get paid out over the next 5 years. These people get paid out in years 6 through 10. This is all retirement money. So just like your 401k, they'll say, take your 401k with you. You don't need to have it with us anymore. You'll roll it into your own personal retirement account. Your 401k, as well as your ESOP, is all money that you've set aside for your retirement. You didn't pay taxes on the year that you earned it. So if you earned $5,000 in the ESOP this year, it doesn't show up on your tax return. We ignore it, kind of. But when you get the value of that in your retirement, maybe that $5,000 is worth $20,000, then it's considered current income. So when I'm talking about helping the business and you're going to get stock, well, interesting. So there's 2 ways really you're earning money within this plan. One is you make profits and the company can afford to fund it. That's the contribution each year. And then the second part is the value of what's in there. Your company stock increases, maybe. Well, how do we get the increase? Well, this is what, or how your company is valued. There's an appraiser that looks at everything. They look at the world in total. They look at your industry. So they're, even Delaware, what's construction, what's the state doing, because that all matters. If the state and the federal government are spending lots of money, then you probably are going to do well since you're part of that. But then they look at the nature and history of your company. That track record has a ton of value. Your reputation has a ton of value. Your clients know you, they trust you, they come back to you with what that has a ton of value. So a company like yours, let's say I set up a new company next to you, like I don't have as much value because I don't have a long-term client list. Then they're going to look at your earnings. How well did you do this year? How well do we expect to do next year, et cetera. So they're looking at all this stuff, and I think the message to all employees is you're all part of this. Try to be efficient. Get the jobs done right the first time. It's very expensive to fix stuff. Worry about your reputation. Worry about the client. There's other vendors out there that you guys are dealing with. Wear your company shirts with pride. So keep the customer happy, defend the reputation, work safely. You've heard all this stuff. Be on time. If you're critical to a job and they can't start without you and you're 30 minutes late and there's 10 people on the crew, that's actually 5 hours of downtime. It's not 30 minutes, it's 5 hours. There's 10 people there. Take care of your tools and equipment. Yes. Very expensive to keep all that up and running. Present your ideas. If you have thoughts, we want to know about them. Management always wanted to know about them, but now you're actually getting paid to maybe be a little bit more vocal. So you're a little bit shy, you still want to know about them. So your performance affects the company, fine, but your company performance affects the value of what's in this employee stock ownership plan. Interesting. It's now all connected. And that affects your retirement plan, which hopefully encourages you to be more productive. Just some data that I want to point out. Again, I'm not here to talk about your 401k, but I do think these two plans are related, and so is Social Security, which is your retirement. These are retirement plans. You're not getting it today. Geez, why do I care? Because one day you will retire. If you look at Social Security, and if you're not doing it, you can go to Social Security website, type in your own Social Security number, get a login. It will tell you the estimate of what you're going to get paid when you're going to retire. So I encourage you to do it. If historically, if you made $50,000 last year and you're retiring this year and you kind of earned up to that amount, your Social Security benefit for 2021 would have been about $20,000. It's not your paycheck. It's something. It's good. The government's helping, but it's not your current paycheck. Your company is paying someone to offer you that 401k, and they're paying you to put your own money in. They'll match you. So they're encouraging you to do that. Again, I encourage you to do it. And if you think you can't afford it, the best 401k manager I ever heard stand up here and go, give me 50 bucks. You know, every 2 weeks, give me 50 bucks. You won't miss it. And you'll start seeing how that savings builds up. And then the ESOP, which is what we're showing you today. There can be some pretty massive accounts out there. You saw the data earlier. But how to do it. Make this company profitable, help it be more profitable. If there's dividends or distributions, as your shares pile up, you're going to get some of that. Grow the value of the business. Be a loyal employee. These are all ways that your account grows. This is the data I was telling you about earlier, and these numbers are getting bigger, by the way. When I joined the industry 17 years ago, the average ESOP participant had 2.5 times the retirement savings of everybody else. Now it's 4.5. It's getting bigger. And there's reasons for that, but Americans aren't really good savers. That's one of the messages. And this is a forced savings plan. You're going to get it whether you put, regardless of what you do with your 401k. So take care of your company. Accountability to the company, of course. Already been doing that. I like my job. I want to work here. I got to be accountable to the company. Accountability to the client, of course. That's who pays you at the end of the day, by the way. Although your company pays you, it's really the clients. They hire you to do a job. Accountability to each other. Maybe that's a little bit different. The value of your company is dependent upon how well you guys do as a team, not as individuals. So I need you to think about both. And then accountability to yourself is more this retirement plan. It's not a fun subject. It's a little bit overwhelming, but I really encourage you to roll up your sleeves and dig into it. Once you get it, it works pretty well. And that's it. And we'll open it up for questions.
Somebody's got to have a question.
Not you.
Nicole, Angela.
On the investment part, those are years we have now count as being invested?
Yeah, so the question is on the vesting schedule, the years you have now. Do you mind sharing with me approximately how many years you've worked here?
11 years.
You've had 11 years, because it doesn't look like that many. You look pretty young. So 11 years means you have 1 extra year for the 7 years, plus you have 2021, so you're already 2 years through the 5-year vesting schedule.
Now, one more question. On that other thing, I seen where if it's under 5,000, you get paid a lump sum.
Yeah, then we just send you a check. We don't want to chase you around for 5 years.
So what you're saying is when we retire, we will get no more than $5,000 at a time you can get out of.
Yeah, that's a great question. What it says is, when you retire, we look at the size of your account. If your account is $4,000, you're just going to get a check. If your account is $100,000, you're going to get approximately $20,000 every year for the next 5 years.
Okay.
Phil, I'm going to follow up, and obviously I'm a novice at this myself, even though we spend a lot of time. We have the ability to change that going forward as the committee, or no?
You have
As
the
far as that
ability to
5,000.
amend the plan to change it, but you can't pick and choose in any given year. So, but yeah, and it is common that as as your ESOP matures and it builds up some cash, that you might go, well, let's make it 10 grand so we're not chasing these 3 people around that have $7,000.
Honestly, we went conservative because, not knowing exactly people's retirement plans. We went on the conservative side to protect the company.
So so in other words, what we'll have, this year will probably work same as the 401k, we gotta name beneficiaries.
Yes, exactly.
And like we was the past, and they would get $20,000 a year if it was $100,000.
Yeah, so the question is beneficiary forms, absolutely. So this is a qualified retirement plan. There's a beneficiary form that your company will hand out, says please fill it in. If you don't fill it in, state law says here's who gets your benefit. If you're married, it's your spouse. If you don't want your spouse to get something, they need to co-sign. If you've been recently divorced, by the way, I get this all the time too, so I'm going to say, if you've been recently divorced, check your beneficiary forms, because maybe you want to go to someone else or your children or something like that.
Other
Can I ask
questions?
one more question? The more years you got now makes you more vested, is what you're saying?
Well, there's actually 2 parts to your years. One is you're more vested, so like for anyone who's a brand new employee, well actually will only get their first year 2 weeks from now. You have an extra year because you've been here 11 years, but also the longer term employees get a little bit more of the 3% because you're going to get 1 unit for every 1,000 and 1 unit for every 2 years you've been here. You've been here for 11, so you're getting 5 extra points. If you get paid 50 grand, you're getting 55 points, where me getting paid 50 grand and new just get 50 points. So you're going to get 10% more than I am because I'm a
So
new
years do
employee.
make a difference.
Years make a lot of difference, absolutely. Yeah.
We were very intentional about doing it that way. Number one, to recognize the people that have been here for a long period of time. And number 2, because we want people to stay.
Right.
Once they get here.
Anybody else?
Gotta be. We have plenty of time, folks, so, yeah.
We got all night.
We got lots of people. So again, well, congratulations, first of all. But don't be shy. I know it's a little bit of a thick subject. Read through it, do some research, talk to your HR folks. There'll be more presentations as this thing plays out. But make sure you get what's called a summary plan description on the way out the door. And
Yeah, I'm going to ask a couple questions on your behalf, right? Since we got some time here. You don't have to go back to it, Phil, but on slide 6, it talks about the ESOP primarily being invested in the company.
yeah.
So I thought, well, maybe somebody's wondering what else are we invested in. Some companies, if they have excess cash, might be invested in the stock market, real estate, all sorts of other things. We've been invested in real estate. Actually, we sold an asset just recently that was real estate. At the present time, the only thing that we have that would be considered investments outside of George and Lynch, Inc., we're all employees of, that's owned by Gino Holdings. Our hot mix partnerships already talked about, they are considered investments because we're 50-50 partners. We don't own them outright. There are no plans to invest in the stock market, but that is something that other companies may do, or maybe we would choose to do it sometime. One other thing I thought was significant, and Phil touched on it, when he talked about, it's important to be here on December 31, that was really a dialogue we had back and forth with Menke, because, we recognize we have seasonal layoffs, particularly in the hot mix department, but it could be other people too, depending on workload sometimes, or if we have a bad freeze for a couple of weeks. And a lot of other companies, if you're laid off, you're gone. But we recognize we have temporary layoffs. So unless Katie does what she calls a separation of employment letter or form that you sign, even if you're temporarily laid off, you are an employee on December 31, so you're not excluded.
So we have to come here December 31st, is what you're saying?
Just
No. As long as you either get, unemployment or if you're getting a paycheck, you're unemployed.
I mean, you're telling us things that sound like this, another.
Let me sit down front and take a beer.
One other item, and I went over this too. Well, when he talked about, he talked about you get 2 points for every year service, and you get 8 points for every $1,000. Keywords were base, or keyword is base salary. In order to be fair to everybody, so you're on the same playing field, base salary means the rate you were hired at. We don't account for prevailing wages because some people never have access to prevailing wages, and you don't control who does and who doesn't. So be fair to everybody, it's base wages.
One unit for every $1,000 base pay. So like if you made $500 a week, you get 1 unit every 2 weeks.
It's for the year.
In general, yes, but we only do the accounting once a year. So we're going to look at everything you made this year, and then 1 unit for every $1,000 of your base pay that was included in that. So yeah, but in general, it is. Good.
I'll just point out, so we told you who the trustees are. I'll just say who the officers are. If you have questions after today, feel free to reach out by email or, phone call to ask questions.
Have a great holiday. Merry Christmas.
Thank you.